Welcome everyone to Torah is for Everyone. And tonight the portion is Ekev. Believe it or not, Ekev is the same root as Yaakov. Yaakov means heel. And it's also means as a consequence. And as a consequence of your listening or obedience to these mishpatim, like Shema, it is, as I read tonight, if I start coughing, maybe one of you will help me. But I want you to listen as I read, as if these words were speaking to us today. Remember, imagine if Moses were here speaking with us today. And words have power. These words have as much relevance now, if not more, as they did then. And it's like, we kind of have to just read them as if you're reading them for the first time and trying to extract from them what is Moses saying to us today. It's like, and this is Torah. This is a book that has been passed down to us for thousands of years. Every manuscript, every scroll they found is almost identical, maybe to the jot, to the little vowel. It's the same as it was in the original, not like any of the other books. And I want to read you just something before I begin to do this, because I want you to, I'm reading The Lord of the Rings right now. And when I read this, I watch The Lord of the Rings every year, and it becomes, have you ever read it, Sonia? Have you ever heard of them?
I heard of them, but I didn't read it.
Yeah. And here it's about this ring that represents everything that is a burden for us, that we have difficulty letting go, and we hold on to it. It then becomes heavier and heavier as we go. And here, this the hero of the story is named Frodo. He's a hobbit, and he's speaking to Gandalf, who is like a wise man, a wizard in those days. But it says, and I can relate to this in the same way that I look for the truth in the Torah. It says, they're in a battle right now, and the ring has come to him, and he has to try to find a way to get rid of this ring. And it says, there was a lot of evil growing in the world, just like now. And he says, I wish it need not have happened in my time. And sometimes when I look around the world, I say, I can't believe the things I'm seeing. How could this be happening in my time? I used to wonder about what it was like during the Second World War or before the Second World War. Well, what were the people experiencing? And it must have been very similar to today. And then Gandalf said, so Frodo, again, I'll repeat, I wish it need not have happened in my time. And Gandalf says, so do I. And so do all who live to see such times. But this is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. And already, Frodo, our time is beginning to look black and bleak. And that's what the times are like. And yet all we have to do is decide, what do we do in these times? And right now, the world is becoming crazy. What was wrong 20 years ago is right. What was right 20 years ago is wrong. And it's almost like evil in so many ways, decadent, immoral. And we're living in such times. So how do we reconcile how we live? How do we live through this? How do we keep our spirits up, keep from being discouraged? And that's what the Torah is teaching us. So when we read these words, and I'd like you to keep that in mind as I'm reading it, because every time I go to read it, I say, okay, what is it telling me today? So let's look at it. I'm going to share it right now. We're in Deuteronomy, and we started chapter 7, verse 12. And the portion, as I said, is called Ekev. And here he says, if you do, if you obey, if you do obey, and the word here is shma, shma, like shma, from shma, hear. You know, when you say to your kids, listen to me, you don't only mean hear the words that I'm saying, you mean obey me, listen to me, and observe them carefully. Your God, Yud He Vav He, will faithfully maintain for you the covenant made on oath with your forefathers. So we know from reading the Torah that God made a covenant, a brit, with our forefathers. Who were they? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He made a brit with them, a covenant. A covenant is a two-way pact. When you sign a lease, it's a covenant between you and the buyer. God will favor you and bless you and multiply you, blessing the issue from your womb and your produce from the soil, your new grain and wine and oil, the calving of your herd, the lambing of your flock in the land sworn to your fathers to be assigned to you. So he's saying, if you obey these rules, God will take care of you. He will bless you. He will multiply you. Everything will be blessed. Blessing the issue from your womb, meaning you're going to get pregnant. You're going to have a lot of children. Your soil will produce the grain and wine and oil. Your herd will have many calves. Your flocks will have many lambs in the land sworn to your fathers to be assigned to you. In other words, God was giving us the land. You shall be blessed above all other peoples. There shall be no sterile male or female among you, or among your livestock. Yud He Vav He, the Lord God, the Borei Olam, will ward off from you all sickness. Imagine. And all we have to do is obey. We don't have to run to the doctor. We just have to obey him as a people. God will not bring upon you any of the dreadful diseases of Egypt, about which you know, but will inflict them on your enemies. You shall destroy all the peoples that your God delivers to you. Yud He Vav He, showing them no pity. You shall not worship their gods, for they would be a snare to you. And what are these gods? We talked a little bit about the gods. The gods of the people who lived in the land required such horrible things from them. They would sacrifice their children. Some of the practices that they did were so vile, so immoral, that we don't even want to think about them. And it's the same with some of the things that we're seeing in the land today. The people who had lived there before were vile. And we needed to get rid of them. It says, show them no pity. And that's not easy for us, especially for the people who are woke, who are the Democrats, who say, oh, no, we have to be very liberal. We have to take care of everybody. Somewhere God is telling us, get rid of them. Don't allow them to live in the land that I'm giving you. And should you say to yourself, these nations are more numerous than we, how can we dispossess them? So God is telling them, you need have no fear of them. You have just to bear in mind what your God, Yud He Vav He, did to Pharaoh and all the Egyptians. All through the Torah, Moses repeats, remember the Pharaoh. Remember Egypt. This is almost like a prototype, a formula for exactly what would happen. The Pharaoh represents all the gods of the world. And the God of Israel fought against Pharaoh right to the end until they were all destroyed. And he was so stubborn. He would refuse to listen to Moses. And look what happened to them. And here we saw wondrous acts with our own eyes, the signs and the wonders, the mighty hand, the outstretched arms by which God, Yud He Vav He, liberated you. Our people have a tremendous history. We go all the way back to this time where he chose us in the bowels of Egypt. He separated us. He showed us his miracles through 10 plagues. He brought us through the Sea of Reeds, the Yam Suf. He freed us. We didn't free ourselves. His mighty hand freed us. His outstretched arm freed us. Thus will your God, Yud He Vav He, do to all the peoples you now fear. He's telling us that today. I have a friend who's an Israeli who said the reason that we are winning today is because we have the Iron Dome and we have a mighty army, and that's why Israel is winning. No, Israel is winning because God said he would do those things to our enemies. All we have to do is trust him, and that's the biggest thing we have. It's so difficult for us. Your God will also send a plague against them until those who are left in hiding perish before you. How many plagues have we seen in this world? All through the centuries. Not only in Egypt, there were 10 plagues then, but those same plagues hit us century after century. The same story, the same prototype over and over again. And he's constantly telling us, do not stand in dread of them, your enemies. For your God, Yud He Vav He, the master, the creator of the universe, is in your midst. He is a great, gadol, v'norah, an awesome God. Just imagine he's with us today. Sonia, he's with you. Miriam, he's with you. He's with me. Baruch, he's with you. He's with Richard and with Jerry. Every single one of us. He's with us. And every problem that he walks through it with us till he helps us find a solution. Your God, Yud He Vav He, excuse me, let me just take a drink. Will dislodge those people. So those who were living in the land, the land wasn't empty. There were people, the Canaanites living there and others. But your God will dislodge those people. He will get rid of them. But little by little, not overnight. Everything is a process. You will not be able to put an end to them at once, or else the wild beasts would multiply to your harm. Your God, Yud He Vav He, will deliver them up to you. Again, he's doing it, throwing them into utter panic until they are wiped out. And I've heard these stories even in modern history, how the enemy was turned into a panic. We have many stories in the Tanakh about that, how our enemies were fled in a panic until they are wiped out. God will do that, not because we are so great.
I hope so.
We can hope. That's exactly right.
I hope so.
We have to hope.
Yes, absolutely.
And we have the hope because God is telling us here. He says if he helped us in the past, he'll help us in the present. But it's not a one-way street. He's not a sugar daddy. He's asking for our obedience. God, and that's not even a good word, obedience. It sounds like you must obey. He wants us to know that if we follow his commandments, we will be protected. That's why he gave them to us. And you'll see that coming up. God will deliver their kings into your hands, and you shall obliterate the name from under the heavens. Imagine all these kings, the kings of Iran, the kings of Hamas, the kings of Hezbollah, all these kings, you shall obliterate their names from under heaven. No one shall stand up to you until you have wiped them all out. Now, this is important. You shall consign the images of their God to the fire. You shall not covet the silver and the gold on them, and keep it for yourselves, lest you be ensnared by them, for that is abhorrent to your God. We all struggle with the wanting of silver and gold, and the gods of today are represented by that same golden calf, the same silver and gold. We must not be bought. We must not allow those gods who demand our obedience to them, like we see happening with the kings of the world right now, like what's going on in the US and Canada with our leaders. They're handing out gold and silver to people, thinking that if we take them, we'll be free. It's a system that is never filled. It's a horrible system that they're offering us. You must not bring an abhorrent thing into your house, or be prescribed, or you will be proscribed like it. You must reject it as abominable and abhorrent, for it is prescribed. Some of these abhorrent things, I don't know what you can call one of them. Maybe a horseshoe over the door, or a Buddha that sits on the table. How many stores do we go into today where we see a Buddha there for good luck? We put a horseshoe for good luck. People used to carry a rabbit's foot for good luck. All these things are saying, I trust more in that than in the God of Israel. You shall faithfully observe all the instruction, the mitzvot, that I command you today, that you may thrive and be able to possess the land that God promised on oath to your fathers. See, it's not a one-way street. He's asking us to faithfully observe the Torah, the commandments. And what commandments did we have then? The 10. He commanded us, and he's going to repeat that over and over and over in this portion and in others. Remember the long way that your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, has made you travel in the wilderness these past 40 years in order to test you by hardships, to learn what was in your heart, whether you would keep the divine commandments or not. You know, when I was reading this, I was thinking the first 40 years of my life, I lived by my own rules. I didn't listen to anybody. I delved into things that I never should have. I listened to nobody. I learned a lot. I learned what not to do. And then that was the first 40 years. Now I'm in the second 40 years. I traveled in the wilderness for 40 years. The second 40 years, I walked with my God, and I watched how he rebuilt my life. He restored the years, as the prophet Joel said, that the locust has eaten. And I was tested by many hardships. I really take this to heart, to learn what was in my heart. And all through that time, I was longing and yearning for some answers, and God heard me. God subjected you to the hardship of hunger. I'm telling you, there were times I didn't know what I was going to eat. I didn't know where my rent would come from. Then gave you Haman, manna. They call it manna, but the word in Hebrew is man. He gave you man to eat. It was bread from heaven, lechem hashamayim, which neither you nor your ancestors had ever known. God was providing for us during these 40 years in the desert in order to teach you that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of his mouth. This is something that Yeshua said in Matthew. He said exactly the same thing, because our Yeshua, the Rabbi, not the Christian Yeshua, not the Christian Jesus, but our Rabbi Yeshua, he quoted this because he was always bringing us back to the Torah. Wasn't bringing us to him, pointing out the Torah the way Moses did. Moses gave it to us. Yeshua wanted to bring it back, us back to it. The clothes upon you didn't wear out in all those 40 years. Neither did your feet swell during those 40 years. Imagine living in the desert all those years, and our feet didn't swell because God took care of us. Bear in mind that your God disciplines you as a father disciplines his son. You know, last week we got into this a little bit about disciplining, and some people don't agree with the way the discipline used to look like. But I saw during these years of walking with God what true discipline looks like in a family. Because in my home, when I was punished for doing something wrong, I had to either go stand in the corner. I think I'm not even sure I was ever spanked. I don't think so. I was just too afraid of my father. But I had to go into the corner when I did something wrong. But to tell you the truth, I was never sure what I did wrong. They never sat down and explained to me, this is what you did wrong. If you punish a child out of anger by losing your temper and you give them a swat, but you don't explain what's going on or what they did, that's not disciplining. Disciplining is when your child does something wrong and you tell them, go stand in a corner or you have a timeout, and then you bring them to you and you explain very clearly what they did wrong and why they shouldn't do it again. This is discipline. You can't say, wait, you're going to get it, but you don't tell them why. They need to know what they're doing. You can't swat something, a child, out of your own impatience or anger. It doesn't teach them anything. God gave us boundaries. He gave us rules and regulations to live in harmony. So when we get out of that, we end up injuring ourselves or hurting ourselves in some way. And then God brings us back to him and explains us exactly why that happened to us. That's why it's so important to learn the rules. Like when you're driving, you need to learn the rules. Otherwise, you're going to get a ticket and you won't know why. When you buy a new machine, you have to read the rules. This is what you do. If you plug it in backwards or you put it in water, something's going to happen. Everything has boundaries. Therefore, keep the commandments of your God. Yud He Vav He. Walk in God's ways and show reverence. This is going to be repeated in the next few verses. How do we walk in God's ways? This is why we read the Torah. This is why we read all the books, and he shows us. You know, the 10 commandments he gave us are the formula, and then the rest of the books teach us what's going to happen when we obey and what happens when we don't. And it shows us how to do that. Like one of them, do not steal. It makes it very clear. Don't take something from your neighbor that doesn't belong to you. And if you do, you're going to have to give it back with interest. It's very clear because justice is behind everything that God gave us. That's walking in his ways and showing reverence, honor, respect for one another. My rights end where yours begin. We honor and revere our neighbors and those who are in the position that they need to, where they live with justice. For your God, Yud He Vav He, is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing forth from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat food without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron and from whose hills you can mine copper. We had a lot of treasure. And when you have eaten your fill, then you give thanks to your God. You don't complain, I didn't get enough. You give thanks to your God for the good land he has given you. These things are so important that we look at this land that he gave us. Very different from Egypt. Egypt had the Nile River. The Nile River fed, you had to work, bring the water. But the land of Israel didn't have natural water. We had to rely on the water from above. It was always about learning to trust him. Take care lest you forget your God, Yud He Vav He, and fail to keep the divine commandments, rules, and laws, the mishpatim, the chukim, and the Torah, which I command you today. And if you speak to most of your friends, how many have ever even read the Torah? How many can name you off the 10 commandments? Very few of us. I've learned them by heart, because I teach it and because I need to know, how do I live? I don't want to go back to my first 40 years where I struggled. I want to walk God's way, not Frank Sinatra's way. I did it my way. I want to do it his way. When you have eaten your fill, excuse me, and have built fine houses to live in, and your herd and your flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, be careful, beware, lest your heart grow proud, haughty, arrogant. How many people who are wealthy today are so arrogant, thinking they're better than everybody else because they have money and you don't? And you forget your God, Yud He Vav He, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Always going back to remember that period of time. That's how we can see the formula again, the prototype of how we need to live. You know, I remember growing up, we were poor Jews. My parents fought to make their businesses run, and they always had problems, and I always felt poor. It didn't matter how much we had, I always felt poor. And feeling poor always made me think I was less than others, that I had less value than others. And after I came to God and came to know the Torah, I still had that within me, always struggling with money, never understanding my value. And then one day it's almost like I heard out of nowhere, I have no idea how, this voice that said to me, "You are not poor." And it would went like a shockwave through my system. And from that moment on, my paradigm shifted. I did not have problems with money or with people who had it or didn't have it. It had nothing to do with our value. But he doesn't want us to be arrogant and proud, because he led us through the great and terrible wilderness with its serpents and scorpions, a parched land with no water in it, who brought forth water from the rock. Remember Moses? They were complaining at Massah that they didn't have water, and he hit the rock and outpoured water. And he fed us in the wilderness with man, which your ancestors had never known. Why? To test you by hardships, only to benefit you in the end. When we go through a trial or something that's really hard, and we don't give up and we stick through it, and we get help and we get advice and we go to God, please help us, it benefits us in the end. We grow. And you say but then be careful. If you say to yourself, my own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me. Remember that it is your God, Yud He Vav He, who gives you the power to get wealth in fulfillment of the covenant made on oath with your fathers, as is still the case. In other words, God made a covenant, a brit, a pact with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would bless us, that he would bring us to the land. All these things we would be blessed. We would be blessed so that we could bring blessings to all the peoples. We would be a light, so we could bring light to all the nations. Doesn't come from us, comes from him. If we take it on ourselves, that it belongs to us, that it's ours, we did it, be careful, because let me tell you, you're going to be subjected to some experience that's going to humble you. If you do forget your God, Yud He Vav He, and follow other gods to serve them or bow down to them, I warn you this day, you shall surely perish, like the nations that the Lord will cause to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you did not heed your God. It's not necessarily God who's punishing us, but I got to the point in my life where I did follow many other gods. I went all over the place, until I became so sick that I almost did die, and so did my older daughter, to the point of death, because I didn't heed our God. And I didn't know then. I know now. And let me tell you now, I want to follow him. That's why he says, Shema Israel. You are about to cross the Jordan to go in and dispossess nations who are greater and more numerous nor populous than you. Great cities with skies, with walls sky high. A people great and tall, the Anakim, they were like giants, of whom you have knowledge. You know about them. For you have heard it said, who can stand up to the children of Anak? This is when we sent the spies in. And they came back saying, there are giants in the land. We must look like grasshoppers to them. Know then this day that none other, excuse me, my cold, sorry. None other than your God, Yud He Vav He, repeating over and over, I wish I knew how to say it, is crossing at your head. In other words, he's going ahead of you. He's a devouring fire. It is God who will wipe them out, subduing them before them, that you may quickly dispossess and destroy them as God promised you. And when your God, Yud He Vav He, has thrust them from your path, do not say to yourselves, the Lord has enabled us to possess this land because of our virtues. Look what he's saying. Don't think it's because you're so virtuous, you're so great. And I hear people saying this today. They call the people of Israel so holy. The IDF is holy. The religious people in Israel are holy. These are holy people. Don't think that God has given you this land because of your virtues. But look at this. It's rather because of the wickedness of those nations that the Lord is dispossessing them before you. He's allowing us to take over those places again because of the wickedness of Hamas, the wickedness of Hezbollah. These people are so evil. Not because we're so great, but they're so terrible. And the land belongs to him. It's not because of your virtues and your rectitude, your righteousness, that you will be able to possess their country, but it's because of their wickedness that your God is dispossessing those nations before you. Why? In order to fulfill the oath that Yud He Vav He made to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Just remember, we belong to that line. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sonia, and Miriam, and Richard, and Jerry, and Peggy, and Baruch. We're in that line. Know then that it is not for any virtue of yours that your God is giving you this good land to possess, because you're a, what's the word? Keshe oref, stiff-necked, stubborn. We are stubborn. Remember, never forget how you provoked your God to anger in the wilderness. From the day you left Egypt until you reached this place, you have been continually defiant towards God. The whole time we were in the desert, we read this. We read this through the beginnings when we read after Exodus and into Numbers, all the times. 42 stages, and every one of those stages were times when we complained. We kvetched. We were never good enough. At Horeb, Mount Sinai, you so provoked God that God was angry enough with you to have destroyed you. He was so upset. I don't know about you, but there's been times that someone has upset me so much that I just wanted to get rid of them. If I had a machine gun, gone. So imagine if God could feel like that, how he must have been so upset with us. And I'm just kidding. There's no one I want to kill with a machine gun. I had ascended the mountain.
Don't worry, Peggy.
Thank you.
I'm not. I feel the same way. Don't worry.
Honestly, I had ascended the mountain. Here, Moses is saying, I went up the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that God had made with you. the tablets of the 10 commandments. I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, eating no bread and drinking no water. He's reminding us. And God gave me the 2 tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. I've spoken to rabbis who said to me, no, Moses was just a wise man. He went up and he wrote it. This is a rabbi. What are they doing with the Torah? When they say, here it says, gave me the 2 tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. These are the only words inscribed by the finger of God. Everything else was written by Moses and by other people later on, with the exact words that Yud-He Vav-He had addressed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of the assembly. So as we stood by this mountain that was shaking and the fire was there on the top of the mountain and it was thundering, we heard his voice. He spoke the words to the people and they all heard. And at the end of those 40 days and 40 nights, Yud-He-Vav-He gave me the 2 stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant, the Brit. That's our covenant. That's the covenant of Israel. That's the constitution of Israel. And the Lord said to me, hurry down from here at once, for the people whom you brought out of Egypt have acted wickedly. What did we do? We were building the golden calf. We wanted to go back to Egypt. Where is Moses? He's gone 40 days and 40 nights. It's a month and a half. We don't know if he's coming back. They have been quick to stray from the path that I commanded upon them. Even Aaron, his brother, what did he do?
They have no patience.
What?
They have no patience to wait.
They have no patience. And how many of us have patience? We don't have patience. And they were afraid. They felt that they were left alone in the desert. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know how to get back. They were frightened. So the only thing that they knew how to do was to go back to the gods that they knew in Egypt, that God was taking them out of. And they made themselves a molten image, the Egel Zachav, the golden calf. The Lord further said to me, I can see this is a stiff-necked people. Over and over and over throughout our history, we've done exactly the same thing. And God said, let me alone. I will destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven, and I will make you a nation far more numerous than they. And I started down the mountain. It was a mountain ablaze with fire, 2 tablets of the covenant in my 2 hands. I saw how you had sinned against your God. Yud-He-Vav-He. You had made yourselves a molten calf. You had been quick to stray from the path that the Lord has enjoined upon you. Therefore, I gripped the 2 tablets and I flung them away with both hands, smashing them before your very eyes. I threw them down before the Lord, eating no bread and drinking no water for 40 days and 40 nights as before. He went back up again. Another 40 days and 40 nights, no bread and no water. I can't do that for 2 days in a row. Here, God, he stands before God because of the great wrong you had committed, doing what displeased and vexed Yud-He-Vav-He. For I was in dread of the fierce anger against which you moved Yud-He-Vav-He to wipe you out. Moses is warning us, listen, I was afraid he was going to just wipe you all out. And at that time, too, the Lord gave heed to me. He heard me because Moses begged for our lives. Moreover, the Lord was angry with Aaron, enough to have destroyed him. So I also interceded for Aaron at that time. As for that sinful thing that you made, the calf, I took it and put it in the fire, and I broke it to bits and ground it thoroughly until it was fine as dust, and I threw its dust into the brook that comes from the mountain. Again, you provoked the Lord at Taberah, at Massah, at Kibrot Hatava. All these are places that we provoked God. And we'd have to go back to Numbers to find out what happened there. And when the Lord sent you on from Kadesh Barnea, saying, go up and take possession of the land that I'm giving you, you flouted the command of your God, whom you did not put your trust in nor obey. Bitachon. You see, one of the things that our rabbi said is each of us have been given faith. Everybody has faith. But what do we put our faith in? Gods, false gods, in the God of Israel, in ourselves, in our work, in something. We put our faith in something. But to build bitachon, trust, it takes a step of faith. And God wants us to take that step of faith. Maybe he's calling you and I to do something today that we may not want to do. We're afraid. And maybe for whatever reason, we have to go to God and say, help me take a step of faith, because I don't know where it's going to lead me, but maybe you have something in there that will be good for myself and others. We have to constantly be talking to our God. As long as I've known you, you have been defiant toward the Lord. When I lay prostrate before God, those 40 days and 40 nights, because the Lord was determined to destroy you, I prayed to God and said, oh, Lord God, do not annihilate your very people, whom you redeemed in your majesty and whom you freed from Egypt with a mighty hand. You know, we've been close throughout the centuries to annihilation. We were kicked out of Israel, where we went to Babylon, and many people were killed. From Babylon, we went to Iran, modern day Iran, to Persia. And in Persia, there arose a man named Haman. And his idea was to annihilate our people. He was the same root as the Amalekites, who tried to annihilate us when we were leaving. They tried to annihilate us, and the Greeks, the Romans, the Soviets, the Germans were the last ones, the pogroms, the Nazis, and now here we are again. What is God is saying to us? He will not allow anyone to touch us when we're obedient to him. So we need to turn around, start looking. What are we doing? Are we being obedient to God today? Give thought to your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Don't pay any heed to the stubbornness of this people, its wickedness, and its sinfulness. Or else the country from which you freed us will say, now here Moses is begging God. He's saying, think of your servants, excuse me, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You made a promise. Moses is going, is pleading for us. He's the intermediary, let's say. And I think maybe God may be asking us to do this today, as Moses did. If we say to God today, pay no heed to the stubbornness of our people, its wickedness, and its sinfulness, we may think that amongst our people, that we're good people, that we don't do anything wrong. Well, if we really are honest with ourselves, there are plenty of us who are doing a lot of wrong things. And I could name a few, but I don't want to right here and now. You all know. And even when we do something wrong, we're part of that. But Moses is interceding, and he says, or else the country from which you freed us will say, it was because God was powerless to bring them into the land promised to them. And because of having rejected them, their God brought them out to have them die in the wilderness. So he's telling God, you want them to see you as almighty. And here he's negotiating. He's very good at that. Yet they are your very own people. We are his own people, whom you freed with your great might and your outstretched arms. So the Lord said to me, carve out 2 tablets of stone like the first, come up to me on the mountain and make an ark of wood. And I will inscribe on the tablets the commandments on the first, that you smashed, and you shall deposit them into the ark. I made an ark of acacia wood and carved out 2 tablets of stone like the first. I took the 2 tablets with me and went up the mountain. So the first time God cut the tablets out of the stone and gave them. But this time Moses had to cut them out of the stone. But God wrote them again. And he inscribed on the tablets the same as on the first, the 10 commandments that the Lord addressed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of assembly. The Lord gave them to me. Then I left and went down the mountain. I deposited the tablets in the ark that I had made, where they still are, as the Lord commanded me. I wish I knew where that ark is. But we don't really need them anymore because we know about them. And
Well, you Raiders of the Lost Ark, who knows?
yeah, that's right. But he wrote them on our hearts.
Right.
From Berot Bnei Yakan, the Israelites marched to Moserah. Aaron died there and was buried there. And his son Eliezer became Cohen in his stead. And there they marched to Gudgod. This is from Numbers. And from Gudgod to Jobat, a region of running brooks. At that time, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the covenant, to stand in attendance upon God, to bless in God's name, as is the case. That is why Levi has received no hereditary portion along with its kin, for the Lord is its portion, as your God spoke concerning it. I had stayed on the mountain as I did the first time, 40 days and 40 nights, and the Lord heeded me once again and agreed not to destroy you. Then he said to me, get up, resume the march at the head of the people, that they may go and possess the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. And now, O Israel, what does your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, demand of you? This is really important. What is he asking us? Only this: to revere, have reverence, honor your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Walk only in divine paths, in the things that he asked you to do, to love, which is loyalty, ahavah, to serve your God with all your heart and with all your soul, keeping his commandments and laws, the mitzvot and the hukim, which I commanded you today for your good. Mark, listen well. The heavens and to the uttermost reaches belong to your God, and the earth and all that is on it, everything belongs to him. Yet it was to your ancestors that the Lord was drawn out of love for them. He loved us, he chose us, he formed us, so that you, their lineal descendants, that's us today, every descendant of Moshe's, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were chosen from among all peoples, as is now the case. It's the case again with us today. This says, circumcise the thickening about your hearts and stiffen your necks no more. So I looked that up. What does it mean? And our rabbi spoke of it. He says, this says here in verses 12 to 20 of Deuteronomy, it speaks of how to love God and serve him. We need to circumcise the foreskin of our hearts. The heart in Hebrew represents knowledge, will, volition, and the foreskin is a covering. Removing it means that we will be exposed and show others who we are. He knows our heart. He knows our intentions. We cannot fool him or bribe him. Hypocrisy has no place in the life of a true follower of our Creator. Doing charity or good works cannot buy him. The Creator doesn't want us to be slaves of anyone or anything, not even him. To circumcise our hearts refers to exposing our hearts, being vulnerable, lowering our guard and our pride as we become open to the changes that God will perform in our lives as we are loyal to Him. The heart in Hebrew is the center of action, intentions, intelligence, and will. The heart has nothing to do with feelings. The same as the word ahava, love, pertains to loyalty. Our Creator asks us to be loyal to Him when He asks us to love Him with all our hearts. The prophet Jeremiah told us, "Who can know the heart of man? It is deceitful. Only the Creator can measure the heart of man." For your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, is God supreme, Lord supreme, the great, the mighty, and awesome God who shows no favor and takes no bribe, upholds the cause of the orphan, the widow, befriends the stranger among us, those who were not born of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, providing them food and clothing. You too must befriend the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You must revere God. Only your God shall you worship, shall you hold fast, and by God's name alone shall you swear. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is your glory and your God, who wrought for you those marvelous, awesome deeds that you saw with your own eyes. Your ancestors went down to Egypt, 70 people, and now your God has made you as numerous as the stars of heaven. So love, therefore, the Lord your God and keep His charge, His mishpatim, His chukim, His Torah, His mitzvot. Remember this day that it was not your children who neither experienced nor witnessed the lesson of your God, but God's majesty and outstretched arm, the signs and deeds that God performed in Egypt against Pharaoh. Again, we go back to Egypt and Pharaoh, king of all of Egypt and all his land. He's reminding us about this time for many, many, many reasons. Hang on a second. I just saw that somebody chatted me here. Okay. What God did to Egypt's army, remember back to his horses, his chariots, how the Lord rolled back the waters of the Sea of Reeds when they were pursuing you, thus destroying them once and for all. When we have problems in our lives that seem so great as standing at the edge of the Sea of Reeds with the Egyptian army behind us, we're to remember what God did for us, knowing that when we turn to Him, He will help us. He always does. Remember what He did in the wilderness. That's why He gave us these stories, so we would never be discouraged. What God did to Datam and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, the sons of Reuben, when the earth opened up and swallowed them along with their households, their tents, and every living thing. Those who rebelled against God and were going against Moses, God took care of them. But that it was you who saw with your own eyes all the marvelous deeds that God performed. Now, we today may not have seen it with our eyes, but we can read these stories and trust them. Keep, therefore, shmartem, keep guard, shomer, all the mitzvot that I command you today, so that you may have the strength to enter and take possession of the land that you are about to cross into and possess. If we think we don't have strength to go ahead, we need to turn to God and ask Him for strength. That you may long endure upon the soil that the Lord swore to your fathers to assign to them. God gave us the land, and to their heirs, that's us, a land flowing with milk and honey. He's reminding us again, for the land that you are about to enter and possess, listen to this, the land that you are about to enter and possess is not like the land of Egypt from which you have come. There, the grain you sowed had to be watered by your own labors like a vegetable garden. But the land you are about to cross into and possess, a land of hills and valleys, it soaks up water from the rains of heaven. In other words, it's a land which your God looks after, on which your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, always keeps an eye. from year's beginning, which is a Nisan at Pesach, to the year's end, right at the end of Shmini Atzeret, right to the end. It is a land which God looks after. He's looking after us. Even today, right now, the land isn't ours. He put us there, but it belongs to him. So he's going to get all that evil out of there, even if it's us who's evil. If then you obey the commandments that I command you this day, to love your God and serve him with all your heart and soul. And how do we serve God? By serving each other, taking care of one another, taking care of the widow, the orphan, the children, being kind to our neighbor, following his rules and his regulations each and every day of our lives. Then he says, I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late, and you shall gather in your new grain and your wine and your oil. I will provide the grass in the fields for your cattle, and thus you shall eat your fill. But be careful, again, not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow to them. Don't worry what these government heads are, these self-proclaimed gods. For the Lord's anger will flare up against them, shutting the sky so that there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you shall soon perish from the good land that God is assigning you. So remember, don't trust in man, trust in him. Therefore, impress these my words upon your very heart. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. These are expressions, like he said before, circumcise your heart, which means open your heart, uncover your heart. Here, bind them as a sign on your hand. My word on your hand means everything that you do with your hands, do them to God. A symbol on your forehead, everything that you see, everything that goes before you. Keep these commandments in everything you do, and teach them to your children, reciting them when you stay at home, when you're away, when you lie down. We say this every week, the Shema and the Ve'ahavta, when you get up. Inscribe them on the mezuzot, write them, the Shema, on the mezuzahs of your house and on your gates, so that you and your children may endure in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to assign to them, as long as there is a heaven on earth. If then you faithfully keep all this Torah, all these mitzvot that I command you, loving your God, love him, obey him, be loyal to him, choose him first, walk in all his ways that he gave us, hold fast to him, then God will dislodge before you all these nations. You will dispossess nations greater and more numerous than you. Every spot on which your foot treads shall be yours. Your territory shall extend from the wilderness to the Lebanon, from the river to the sea. What do we hear today? These crazies who say, from the river to the sea shall be ours. The river to the sea shall belong to Israel. Says it right here in our Torah. From the river to the sea. You see that? No one shall stand up to you. Your God will put the dread and the fear of you over the whole land in which you set foot, as he promised. I mean, how much clearer can it be? Nu, Sonia, what do you think? What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of information here.
Yes, that's why we read it again over and over and over. Every year we read it again. I've been reading it now, 35 years? Since 1989. I've been reading it.
What made you turn to other ways of believing, or something was missing in your life?
Yes.
40 years you were searching for.
Yes, I grew up in a very unhappy, I would have to say ungodly home. My parents didn't want to have anything to do with Judaism. My father didn't want anything to do with God. He came back from the war, the Second World War that he fought in, very angry with God. My mother came from a very, I would say in those days, a conservative home, but she really wasn't interested in being observant. I think she believed in God, but she went with my father, so we
What's your
really,
mother's maiden name?
pardon?
What's your mother's maiden name?
Simon.
Simon.
Yeah, Shane Munn. Anyway, but she, so we weren't raised really with the holidays, but we knew we were Jewish. What that meant, I don't know, but it didn't mean following God. It meant we belonged to a people. But my father never went to synagogue. He never felt he fit in the Jewish community. He always felt like.
Why? He never felt.
I don't know, maybe because he didn't finish school. I think he left, he quit at 13. He quit school at 13 and he ran away from home. He was very unhappy at home. I don't know much about him in those early years. And I know he ran away again at 17. He ran to Hollywood. He was very handsome, great build, very charismatic, funny. He made people laugh, and he ran away and he came back. So our home I didn't have a foundation at home. And when I got married, I married someone who I was not meant to be with. And it was a horrible, horrible marriage. And after 9 years, I couldn't take it anymore and I left. And, but during that time, because of some physical illnesses that I had, I was physically not well. I was always looking for reasons for, what was wrong with me and why I was so unhappy and why I was so sick. And so I was led. It's almost like doors would open and I would go in. Like even, I don't know, it's a long, long, long story. Actually, I've written a lot of it, but I went through many things in search for truth, through healing things, vitamin therapy. I took psychology. I became a hypnotherapist. I worked with a doctor. They sent me patients. I was always looking for answers. And eventually, I was led in directions that were not healthy, led me into the New Age, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, different isms. And none of them were satisfying. None of them gave me answers. And I physically became sicker and sicker. And my children were sicker and sicker. And like my whole life was falling apart around me until suddenly everything just stopped. And something happened and I just woke up. And I came back home and I came to find my cousin was what's called a Hebrew Christian. She was a Jewish believer in Jesus, and she invited me to her Bible studies, and I started to learn the Bible from there. But I didn't agree with Christianity, and I eventually left that, but stuck with the Bible. So it's a really, really a long story. I'm giving you like such just smatterings of it. It's over. Look, I'm 77 years old now. So it's like a long story.
But you never wanted to inquire about your own religion. You were Jewish, but you never felt like to have more knowledge or where we come from, history of our people and so on.
Yes, well, I would go to a synagogue, but there was nobody there. My parents weren't interested, and nobody in my family were really interested. So I would go into a synagogue and nobody welcomed me in. I was just, nobody knew what to do with me. So, and in school, I didn't go to a Jewish school. And in those days, we went to a Protestant school. Public schools were Protestant schools. So that's when I learned about the Bible, but I learned about Jesus from the Protestants. And I didn't learn much about Judaism at home. I had a cousin who was Orthodox, but when I went to the Seder at their house, all they did was everything was in Hebrew, and they rushed to get through to watch the hockey game. Every year was at the Stanley Cup, was at the time of the Seders. So there was nobody really to teach us. The only thing I knew about Hanukkah was the food and Hanukkah Gelt. The only thing I knew about Purim was the Humantashen. We didn't learn about God. We learned about some of the traditions, but they had no meaning. They were empty. And these other religions looked very enticing. But when you get into them, you find how they're like a trap. They ensnare you, like the Torah says. But once I gave my life over to God, and believe it or not, I one of the things that I did was I prayed to ask Jesus into my heart. I had no idea what that meant, but all I knew is when I needed a change. And then I started reading the Bible. I was voracious for it. Something happened. And then I watched one step after the next, how one door opened. I was able to rebuild. I was able to get a new job. I was able to, rebuild my life in a way that was unbelievable. Everything. And I saw that God wanted a real relationship with me and that he was leading me on the right path. So it's a long story, but every one of us here has our own story. We all have our own journey. And it isn't only one way. Miriam has hers. Jerry has his own journey. So does Richard. So do you. So does Baruch. But when the more I saw that I was obedient to his commandments, to what he said, and let me tell you, it's a struggle. I struggle with it every single day to do the right thing. Because it's easy to be bought. It's easy to just not be interested. I'd rather just live my life and let me go and have a party. And it's not easy to want to serve God, because sometimes you look like a religious fanatic, but I'm not. I want to do the right thing. And you stand aside from the rest, because even with the holidays, so many rules and regulations have been added to our holidays that we don't always know what does God want from us. But he tells us in the Torah.
Do you, excuse me, with the time, do you develop this connection to God?
Yes.
Some kind of feeling? What made you feel that you have connection with God?
It was not only feeling, there were experiences that I went through that showed me that he was listening. I would pray and the answer would be there. It's like we have a direct line. Just like Moses spoke to him face to face, we have a direct line with our God. And he does answer us. He cares about us. And he helps us to solve our problems. In so many ways, it's overwhelming.
Sometimes you don't know what is your problem.
Pardon? Sometimes you don't know?
That's right.
You ask?
You're not happy, and something is missing in your life.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to find out.
Well, that's what
you're kind of searching, by being exposed to different things and stuff like that. Nothing to do with God, really.
Well, I think you have to just go inside in the still, when we have a prophet, I think it was Elijah, who was it Elijah hiding in the cave? I can't remember. But it says that there was first there was a fire, and then there was thunder, and and there was lightning, and then there was quiet, and God spoke to him in the quiet. Sometimes when you don't know what to do, you honestly have to turn off everything and just be still and ask God to show you in the depths of your soul, to speak to you in a way and something happens. Maybe somebody will call you, or you may even hear a voice. You may have a sensation. Something will happen. I've had that over and over in my life. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, I want to talk about the being tested aspect of it. Okay.
Can you repeat that again? I didn't hear you.
Okay. I'm going to change microphones. Okay, hold on. How can you hear me now? Okay.
I can hear you. It's just that Brian was speaking when you were speaking. I can't hear two at a time.
Okay, so I want to talk about what I learned about the being tested part, about God testing us, right?
Right.
Follow me so far? Okay, well, in my other Torah study, I often bring up something that a certain mathematician wrote about being tested in the Bible. For example, Abraham being tested, and the two mothers being tested by Solomon. To name two examples. And in each case, it's brought up that the testee did not know that he or she was being tested.
Right.
Okay. So, and that and faithfulness. In the case of Abraham, faithfulness was being watched. And in the case of the two mothers, two competing women, one saying that she's the mother of a baby. Solomon was testing them without their being aware that they're being tested. All right.
Right.
Okay. So, I've struggled through things. I've been faithful to certain principles, and I went through certain hard things. Frankly, I used examples from 12-step programs, which do talk about God or a higher power. I saw that other people were turning their lives around, and I was able to as well. And about the conversation about not being interested in being Jewish many years ago, I witnessed that in my family and also in many Jewish kids I grew up with. I hate to say it, but in the 20th century at least, we Jews did not seem to feel inspired very much. Other religions seem to have messages that inspire. Ours, at least in my assessment, did not. And I'm sure that historians in the future will look back and say, well, it was because of the hardships and it was because of competing ideologies like psychology ideas and evolutionary ideas about natural selection and so on and so forth. But frankly speaking, we need to reignite the sparks of inspiration in our people. And so with that, I have talked enough.
Well, to me, when I read the Torah, let me tell you, I find it very inspiring. I get excited. I get excited because I know that it leads to healing, to health, to happiness, to fulfillment. It leads to many things that I've experienced in my life. So I think, Sonia,
Yes.
what you can do, honestly, is you really need to take some time to be quiet and just talk to God and ask him to show you the things that it says in Psalm 139, if you read it, it helps to read the scriptures, to read the Psalms, read what other people say about their relationship with God. And King David said, "Search me, O God, know my heart. Test me, try me, and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way within me, and lead me into your way everlasting." And I pray those words. God hears us. He wants you to know him more than you want to know him. He wants you to know who he is. He's like a loving father who's constantly holding his hands out. Come, my tzatzkele. Come, let me carry you for a while. And, we, like stubborn children, you say more often than not, nah, I want to do it my way. I do it myself. That's the way we are. And he is really like a loving father. And the more we turn to him, the healthier and the stronger we become. The more we turn away from him, the more chaos we produce in our lives. Look at the world right now. We are falling into chaos. Nations are divided. There's so much immorality and decadence and murder and every horrible thing. There is still good. I thank God that there's still good in this world, so that I can hope that there are enough righteous men and women, that God doesn't destroy us all. But we need to be that light. That's God said, "I chose you." My father used to say, let him choose somebody else for a change. What are we chosen for? I'm sure you've heard that. But maybe we Canadian Jews have grown very soft. Everything was handed to us too easy. The Jews who lived in Europe went through hell. We didn't go through hell here. We've been very spoiled in this country. And God said, when you go into a land, and he was referring to the promised land, but anywhere we are, if you grow fat, don't forget me. And that's the first thing we do. We forget him. And how do we know him? By reading his words. How do you find out about another person? You spend time with them. You talk to them. It's the same with God. You spend time with him. How? By reading what he wrote to us, by reading what he said. We'll read the newspapers. We'll read magazines. We'll read the news. But how many of us want to spend the time to read what he said to us? So you go back to the beginning, back to Genesis, right to the very beginning. You just slowly read. Read as many verses as you can. You can't read anymore. You close it and you go back the next day. That's what my heart is. My desire by doing what I'm doing is, I don't want to become, I'm not a scholar. God didn't speak to scholars. He spoke to you and me at the base of Mount Sinai. He spoke to Moses. He spoke to Yeshua. And he speaks to us. He speaks to us today in many ways. We just have to tune in. We have to attune ourselves to the right frequency, get above all the noise that we hear on this planet. Don't listen to it all. And just say, okay, God, speak to me. I do that. I get up in the morning, Lord, what do you have for me today? How can I be of service to you today? What can I do today? And he guides me like the fire by day, fire by night, and the cloud by day. He guides us. He's as real now as he was then.
They say that there's, in each and every one of us, there is a God. There's part of God in us. And
Yes.
that's maybe how you get contact, connected to God.
Exactly. He breathed his ruach, his spirit into us. He gave us his characteristics. And he speaks to us at that level, at the level of the spirit, of course. Because we can't approach God with our physical bodies, or we would die. He's pure light. You can't look at the sun. It's too bright. He's brighter than the sun. He created the sun. So, but we have to reach him at the level of our soul. And we just need to take time to ask him, to search ourselves.
So in other words, the inner you, the inside of you, gives you guidance.
Yes.
You trust kind of yourself, you trust the connected in God, and you follow the inside of you tells you.
But you have to be careful with that, because I followed that for many years, but went in the wrong direction, because you need boundaries. Like a child needs boundaries. If you let a 2-year-old run out of the house, it'll probably run right into the street and get hit by a car. It needs a leash. We need boundaries. This is what we can do and what we can't do. If you have those boundaries in your life, and God gives us the boundaries in his commandments, then we can follow those instincts. And let me tell you, he speaks to us. I've had beautiful stories I've heard from people. And when you do follow those instincts and listen, and listen to it's an inner voice.
Right.
And when, like, sometimes somebody will pop into my head, and and it's so strong, I go and I call them. Oh, I really needed to speak to you at this moment. You just knew when to call me. He really does guide us. We just need to be open. And I saw that when I was rebuilding my life. It all came through guidance, the right guidance. I had the wrong guidance, going in the wrong directions, constantly hitting a wall, because I had no boundaries then. I could do anything I wanted. It looks confusing. You look confused, Daniele.
What I'm looking at it by my own behavior, my decision making, and everything, and I kind of follow my own instinct, kind of thing. My own feeling what I have, what I want to do, what I don't want to do, or what should I be doing, what is the right thing to do.
That's
to
good.
help or whatever.
That's good. And does it work for you?
Yes.
So your life is in harmony and peace and balance? Would you say so?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then you're on the right track.
Well, sooner or later, I come to realize this is not the way to go, and something inside of me is not happy about it. So I have to follow that instinct. If I'm not happy, it doesn't suit me, I have to do something about it.
That's good. I think that's very good. I do the same thing. I follow my instinct.
Yeah.
But within reason and within boundaries.
Yes.
Not something that goes against what God says in his commandments. Like he said, you shall not steal. I may go into a store and my instinct leads me to want to take something that I see. Nobody's looking. It's easy. I could just put it in my purse. It'll make me happy if I have it. But I know his boundaries say no. So I have to turn away from that instinct. Because remember, we have what they call in Judaism, the Yetzer, hara, the evil inclination, and the Yetzer hatov, the good inclination. Excuse me. So we have to be careful. That's what I'm talking about, boundaries. You understand?
Sometimes you have to fight it. You know it's not a good thing, but you feel like having it or whatever. But then you see the pros and the con, and that's what makes you, okay, I shouldn't be doing it.
Exactly.
You decide.
Excuse me. My cold is taking over.
Okay,
So if
yeah,
we have
enough
anything,
talking.
I would love to talk more. It's just that my body is saying no more.
No,
Does anybody
right.
have anything else to add?
It was very good, but I'm also like, my allergies have been terrible. I'm so exhausted, but I've taken it in, and it's God has given us the moral compass on how to live, and as you said, when we have that as a guide, then everything's measured about that, and we have as much room within those boundaries. We have free will to make choices,
Exactly.
but it's a journey.
It is a journey. And we make decisions according to what society dictates. Like right now, society in general dictates that it's okay to have an abortion, that you can have as many abortions as you want. As a matter of fact, even in Israel, they allow the women to have 3 abortions a year. And yet the Torah teaches, the Bible teaches us that we have the soul that you said, something in you, the ruach, was implanted in us at the moment of conception, not the moment we're outside the body, but the moment of conception. At 10 weeks old, there are little feet already. A fully formed human being is inside the body of a woman, and it's a completely separate entity from the woman. The woman becomes the container holding this other individual connected. So when we take that individual and we kill it, basically we are committing murder. And God said, you shall not commit murder. So it's up to us to decide, do I follow what God says or do I follow what the world says? And right now there are how many, 50 million abortions a year around the world? It's like the land is crying out. The blood is crying out from the land, and God is not happy. So we can say, well, I don't agree. I'm free. I can do what I want with my body. And yes, you can. I did. I used to be pro-choice. I sat on a pro-choice committee. I spoke on the radio on pro-choice. I had an abortion, and I just believed it was just a fetus. But one day somebody came into our congregation, and he had a little lapel pin of a baby of 10 weeks old, little feet of a baby of 10 weeks old. And that my child was 10 weeks old when I aborted it. And I had a reason that was perfectly right, justified to me. But then when I saw what God said, you shall not commit premeditated murder, I understood what I did. And I had to go to God to ask for forgiveness because I took the life of that child. I had no right to do that. Most people may not agree with me, but that's their right. You could agree what you want. Don't argue with me. Go to talk to God about it. So I just
Give the child to somebody.
sorry, Brian, I muted you.
Can hear him.
Give the child to somebody who can't have a baby.
You're right. I should have done that. But once I had it, in my case, I was still married, and I was very, very, very unhappy, and I just wanted out. And it was really for my convenience. We bow to the God of convenience today. We bow to the God of comfort. I do it to satisfy myself because I don't have time for others. And it just was wrong. But I'm so glad that we serve a God who is very forgiving and has compassion on us. Sometimes we pay the consequences for the things that we do. Actually, we always pay the consequences for what we do.
Baby could have been a boy, no?
It could have been a boy.
What's the difference? A boy and a girl, still
Well,
a child.
exactly. And I'll see him one day.
her husband's name doesn't get carried on because it wasn't a. She didn't let it grow.
That's very true. That's very true.
Did you ever feel guilty what you did afterwards?
Yes, I felt guilty for so many things. I can't even begin to tell you. My life was filled with guilt, and I had to deal with one thing at a time. And when Joel, the prophet Joel, says that Miriam, if you're too tired and you need to go, just go. It's okay. I understand. The prophet Joel says that God said, "I will restore the years that the locust has eaten." And he really did in my life in absolutely every area, and is still continuing, because we think we've dealt with things in the past, but they come back to face us again and again and again. But each time we're stronger and we're wiser and we're better, because some things are very difficult to deal with, depending on the life that you've lived.
But in case of a rape, it's a very difficult decision to make because you were raped by someone that you dislike. It was forced upon you.
Yes.
And you don't know what to do. You don't want that you don't want that child because it reminds you of, it's like an unwanted child,
Yeah.
It's not that you wanted the child. It
Exactly.
just was forced upon you.
Exactly.
And how do people make a decision like that? That's a very
Well, you and I don't know, Sonia, you and I don't know that our great, 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 great grandmother wasn't raped by a Cossack or somebody, in one of the places of that we lived, because we've been we've been expelled from the land since the times of Babylon, and there are many rapes. And the life of the child is innocent, had nothing to do. And if you can't face the child, you can always give it for adoption.
right.
Family doesn't mean you have to kill the child.
But it's another problem to give up, it's your child, and then
Yes.
to give it up for someone else to adopt it.
Yeah, but then maybe there'll be healing in that relationship with the child. There's so many stories that have come out like that.
Yeah,
Children.
it's a very difficult decision.
Yeah, the decision usually the most difficult is when it's the mother who could lose her life. If the child.
That's a different thing.
Yeah.
In our religion, if it interferes in your life, it's okay. I mean,
Yeah. And
if
yet,
your life is in danger,
yeah. And yet I've heard a story where the mother said, let him live.
right.
Let me go. So it's really, it's difficult. There's a lot of gray areas in Judaism.
It's up to the individual. That's why it shouldn't be a law. You're not allowed or you're allowed, it's all individual.
Yeah, but you
It's
have
all
to have,
individual decision.
but we have to have boundaries. If we do not have boundaries on this earth, chaos reigns. God took the chaos and turned it to order. We want to live in order and balance in this world. Right now, it's out of order. Anything goes. Right now, it's gone to the extreme, and that we're not going to solve it here tonight. All we can do is solve the problems in our own lives.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jerry, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, it's wonderful that we're having a discussion, and I think this is wonderful future good discussions, and everyone is participating, and Sonia and Richard, and a special Yosher Koyach to Baruch. For a man of few words, he comes up with very insightful inspirations. So Yosher Koyach to you, Baruch. Quiet guy mostly, but when you say something, we have to take notes. So
exactly.
I was very, very, very impressed with the suggestion that you made. Thank you, Baruch.
Did you hear what he said, Baruch? He gave you a compliment.
Oh boy, did we ever?
You see that? Did you?
About the baby stuff.
Yeah.
Jerry, how was the convention?
Well, it's still on. I'm taping a little bit. I just started. I left there. Clinton was talking now, but I left. I figured I'd come towards the closing here, but
Okay, so are
maybe-
you ready? You ready to read the Aaronic benediction, Jer?
Yeah. Okay. So
And then we can finish.
and God, our God and God of our fathers, bless us with the threefold blessing written in the Torah by thy servant Moses and spoken by Aaron and his sons, the priests. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'kdushasoi shel Aaron, v'tzivonu levarech es amo Yisrael v'yahavo. Yevarechecho Adonai v'yishmerecho. Yair Adonai panav eilecho v'chuneko. Yisro Adonai panav eilecho v'yosem lecho shalom. V'samu et shemei al bnei Yisrael v'ani arvorchem.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you shalom. So shall they put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. May we be, blessed the rest of this week until Shabbat, when we enjoy the message that we're going to have. Sonia, you're welcome if you want on Shabbat. I can send you the link to attend our service online if you would like on Shabbat. We meet from 12 to 2. Yes, Baruch?
We're 3 for 3. 3 women, 3 men.
3 for 3. We're in balance. That's good. And Sonia, if you ever want to just call and talk to me, off this, if you have a question, I'd be very willing and happy to speak with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I thank you all for your participation. Have a blessed rest of the week. May God hear your voice, answer your prayers, answer our prayers, and keep us safe.
Thank you.
And we we continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Yes.
And for our country, for the United States, for Canada, for the leadership. May we have righteous leaders.
Right. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Good night.